Good morning. For me, it's morning, but good morning to all our listeners. And I'd like to welcome you with my co-host Kentrina and Jenkins and myself, Marj and Matchee. And this is We Got Your Six. We got a special treat for you today. One of my favorite people in the advocacy world and my good friend and fellow advocate, Dave Bona. Welcome, Dave Bona. We're just so happy you joined us this morning. And how are you?
Oh, I'm doing okay. It's been a busy couple of weeks here. Lots going on. Not much in the advocacy world, but more around the house and family stuff going on. So, been busy.
Yeah. Definitely a lot to balance. We're super excited to have you here. So when we were planning the show, we're like, okay, let's get Dave. So pretty excited about that. So I have, so my first question, so, I met you both this year, and one of my favorite stories, that I got to hear about was the events that happened on November 11th, 2016. So it's like, like I felt like kind of like super honored to be able to hear, how you two met, seeing how you guys are like as friends, and then also seeing, how your magic works, like kind of like in the advocacy world. So, so I hear about, the day when Dave Bona kind of like introduced him to Marj. So I'd love to, if you could kind of share the story with everyone. And then I'd also like to know, like, what really inspired you to like kind of like take such a courageous move to do
Wow.
Well, that's interesting. Actually, what led to that was my finally understanding my 2-decade struggle with PTSD and why I wasn't getting better, and every treatment I ever did failed. Like I didn't like living with this. I enjoyed being a dad, and it was severely impacting my ability to be a good dad. So I've always battled PTSD, what I thought was PTSD. And it wasn't until that Sheila Pratt article that was handed to me that I was told I should read, that I realized that not only do I have PTSD, but I also have this brain injury. And the realization that, holy shit, they used us as an illegal drug trial in Somalia. They've poisoned the majority of the airborne regiment, and in particular Clayton Matchee, and like there's a whole list of reasons why, but the big one is like Clayton isn't just Clayton. Clayton has a family. He has a wife. He has a daughter. He has a mom. He has a dad. He has brothers and sisters. Like he has a whole community around him, and like everyone has that. And like, how do you convey the message to the community, not just the family, but the community, that Clayton was poisoned, and that was why the incident happened. And I was trying to brainstorm for quite a while on how to get that message to that community. And then it was coming up on Remembrance Day, and like I tried the media, and the media guys up in PA or up in Meadow Lake, they weren't very receptive to me. We find out after the fact that the media guy I was talking to was the guy that was leading the charge with slamming Clayton way back when. So
Yes.
He wasn't really receptive to his poor reporting and research being brought to light. So that was a dead end. So I had to do a little bit more direct action. And what more direct action than on Remembrance Day, hijacking the Remembrance Day ceremony? Which I did. It was, I showed up there. So just to give myself a bit more credibility and, impact, I wore my maroon beret. I wore my leather blazer with my medals and that on it and jump wings. And I literally walked up on stage right at the end of the ceremony and had to wrestle the lady for the mic and took the mic away from her. And then I basically related the information about the illegal drug trial and Clayton was poisoned and all that. So, and I think that's the first time me and Marj actually formally met.
It was the first Remembrance Day I'd attended since this thing happened. I don't know why I went to that one. It just happened to go to that one, and he did hijack our Remembrance Day, and he did wrestle the microphone a little away from the lady when she was done talking, but no, the place totally listened to him, and I just remember hearing a whole bunch of people stand up and rah behind me there, which was really good. And since then, things have changed for me, for the better, for everyone. I think that you and I meeting, Dave, led to me meeting John Dow, led to me meeting every other person that's in our world that I hadn't met yet, and validating everything. So yeah, I'm for one very grateful for you. And I also know that there's so many people out there who are so grateful to your work that you've done and your kind patience, working people through the process of understanding mefloquine poisoning and that they have it, helping people to understand within their family dynamics how this affects a person. I mean, you single-handedly have saved so many people, and you cannot say Dave Bona around this world that we in, our mefloquine world, without people going, I know I talked to him, like, thank God, So, there's so many people who are grateful for you.
Absolutely. And so Marj, like, in that moment, when like Dave, like, went up to the stage, do you think, like, what do you think, like, you felt? Like, did you feel like all kinds of hope? Of course, I'm sure there was like shock and everything, but like,
it was really shocking. Like, I have to say that it was my sister come across the floor to me and goes, "What's that man saying about Clayton?" Honestly, Dave, my ears were ringing. My blood pressure must have went through the roof. I couldn't really hear what you were saying. I was just like, what is this man doing? I kept thinking, so it was a big shock, actually, because not many people ever stood up and said, the truth that I've been saying. So it was amazing. It was a pivotal moment for me.
Absolutely. And I think it's important, for us to know that and like hear those things like with each other. And it goes to show how much of an impact one person can have, right? Yes. So it's like one big swooping motion, that was probably absolutely terrifying, leads to so much more, right?
You had to be nervous, Dave. I mean, you're a strange man in a strange town and staring down a community after wrestling the microphone from the MC lady. And I mean, cops are all lined up in all their colors and everybody, and he just 6'4" self went right up there and took over. So it was amazing. It really was.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, when you know if something needs to be done, you just sort of got to do it.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Dave, you've been probably one of the most at firsthand. I mean, I've been there, but you're one of the people who has actually more than any of us probably heard that first, I don't know what's wrong with me, or I'm going to take my life. This is crazy. And you've heard all the bad stuff and been able to turn those people around. And is that just because they understood now? Do you think? Is that just because they found
they were in the same boat as me. Like I'm still bump into these people all the time. Like what it is we are led to believe that what we're suffering from is PTSD. And then when you go okay, I've got PTSD, you surrender to it, and you go start doing treatments. Well, you sit there for a year or 3 or 4 or 5 or 15 or 20 years doing PTSD treatments, and your symptoms are slowly getting worse. Like you have the rages all the time, you hurt your family, all this stuff happens continually, no matter what you do to try and stop it. All this stuff still happens. And so when I talk to people, like I give them the information that would have made a difference to me, that I would been able to use to understand what was wrong with me and why all the PTSD treatments weren't working. But the thing is, I don't just explain when I talk to people why their PTSD is not working, but I explain like the whole picture. I explain, how mefloquine works, how the injury happened. Then I explain all the physical symptoms that they're suffering from. And then I give them some basic treatment options and direction forward. And that's the difference right there, is giving someone, because most people just don't roll over and and die, We're conditioned to fight. And when you've been fighting for so long and nothing's working, that's when people finally quit, So by giving people direction forward, you're giving them hope. And usually that's enough. So
I agree. I mean, that's just exactly it. I mean, and I know it's been hard for you. You've absorbed so many stories and so many people's pain. And I guess, Dave, we were talking about that with Mike, how, you are the man who can explain how important it is to eat right, that gut-brain connection. You have this good way of explaining it, and but you do it over and over and over and over again, right? Yeah. And we're hoping that by having you come on this show now and then, and be our Dr. Dave, which I lovingly call you, you can reach more people than just constantly having to be that one point of light. I mean, you'll always be that, but for your health and for all the other advocates, it's a good place to stretch ourselves better, right? Like, you have family, you have to worry about your man things and other things that go on too, and it's very hard on one person, and you've absorbed so much in this last 4 years that I've known you,
Yeah.
So
well, there was a good a good solid year where I was like at least 6 days a week talking to 2 and 3 people a day. Good solid year of that, and the price paid for that was quite high. Like I've pretty much stopped. I had for that whole year pretty much stopped doing stuff with my kids, just because when you talk to people about this stuff, it wipes you right out. You give your little piece of yourself away every time you do that, and after a while, like you got nothing left, and so it's hard, but it needed to be done. That's the thing. Like all our other advocacy efforts were not working. Nothing else was working. The government wasn't stepping up and going, "Hey, we've got a problem here. If you've been exposed to mefloquine, you might have been poisoned." Like there was no proactiveness happening on the behalf of the government. And other advocacy efforts, like they were working, but they were slow. Like you can tweet about stuff, you can do Facebook posts and all that, but until you get that groundswell of people that have been poisoned going to their members of parliament, going to their doctors, going, hey, I think I've been poisoned by mefloquine, and here are the reasons why. Until you have that upswelling of these individuals stepping forward, like nothing's going to change. So how do you do that? Well, there's several ways of doing that. The one way I chose to do it was to actually track down individuals and inform them about the mefloquine poisoning. You know, like, and the only thing I ever asked of people was that they share the information. And with that, you know, like that year of just going hard and, you know, the exponential reach you get by talking to one person, you know, that one person talks to two people, and each of those people talk to one or two people, you know, like, so that year of just going hard, like we've made such inroads within the veteran community. It's incredible. Like there was a time there where we were getting suicides literally coming across the feed, like a couple times a week, you know? And what I notice now is like the suicides are still happening, but they're greatly reduced. You know, like so we've had an impact, if you know what I mean. Like, call it what you will. I don't know. I've talked to so many people now that just know and are actually doing alternative treatments than, you know, PTSD specific treatments, and they're getting their lives back. And that's the single most important thing is, you know, reaching individuals. So
Exactly. And you have done a bang up job of that. My gosh. I mean, if you're like 2-3 people every week for a year, and then that's not counting the rest throughout the other 3 years I know you. But it did start a groundswell.
Yep.
I tried, you know, back in my day, but it was still too raw and still had too much of the government
stigma. Actually,
lies,
there was
right? So you know,
actually, Marj, there was so much stigma attached to your last name.
Yeah.
Because the government has used Clayton as a smokescreen to hide behind.
Yes.
And they blasted him, and it worked like a darn. Like it resulted in the disbandment of the Airborne Regiment. And by disbanding the Airborne Regiment, what they did was they spread out everyone that was poisoned across Canada. And then, like, we couldn't sit down in the junior ranks club and go, hey, like, this is what's happening to me. You know, this is going on. This is going on. I've got these physical symptoms. And, you know, by the second deployment from a set unit like that, that's when this thing would have been red flagged. But with that disbandment, they were able to hide this whole mefloquine BS behind the smokescreen they created with Clayton. And that's all Clayton has become for them, is a smokescreen. And to this day, we're still trying to knock that stigma down. Like we're trying to clear that smoke. Like I even had argument with a guy there 2 weeks ago, and I didn't do it on social media. I took it off, and we had a discussion on the phone. And because he said, oh, Clayton's a bad guy, Clayton's this, Clayton's that. No, wait a minute. Let's back up. The question we got asked, was Clayton poisoned? Yes or no? And he goes, well, blah, blah, blah. Was he poisoned? He goes, well, yeah, he might have been. Okay, what was he poisoned by? And it's like, well, he was poisoned by a highly neurotoxic drug. And what happens when people get poisoned by neurotoxic drugs? It significantly changes their behavior. It changes things like inhibition control, everything. And
lost you.
Technical difficulties.
But the thing with
Great.
that whole incident is it wasn't just Clayton that was poisoned. His entire go, hey, this shouldn't be happening, have been poisoned. I talked to almost every single person in his direct chain of command. Every single one of those guys to this day are battling with the long-term side effects from mefloquine.
So Dave, can you touch on that? I mean, you were part of it, and I spoke till I, my tinfoil hat about this botched drug trial that people really need to understand, especially not only military-wise, but to get that message to the general public that they were duped under the guise of a phony drug trial that never happened, and that this drug was literally fast-tracked throughout the careers of the next how many decades, from the 90s till, people got loud enough, but for the general public. I mean, you know yourself, and I keep saying it, that the general public is now rampant with mental health issues that mimic or are the same as what we are looking at now. PTSD has become a huge catch-all phrase. It scares me.
Yeah. What I'm finding with my advocacy is I'm not just talking to veterans. The largest population I talk to is veterans, but the second largest population I talk to is people that have been doing missionary work and volunteer work overseas.
Yes.
Like I get people referred to me all the time that are civilians that have never been in the military that have been poisoned by mefloquine. And like it's just crazy. Like us Army guys, we get when we have behavioral issues and all that. What happens then is we get stuck under that PTSD umbrella. But if you're a civilian displaying mefloquine poisoning symptoms, what happens then is with the severe mood moderation stuff and all that, you get labeled with bipolar disorder. Yes. Anxiety disorder, all these disorders that, if you look at how they treat them, is with high dose pharmaceuticals.
Right.
And it's actually scary how many people I've come across, civilians, that have been misdiagnosed and mistreated because they've been poisoned by mefloquine. And because a lot of the times with the civilian travelers, even if they have an adverse reaction to the drug overseas, it's most of the time, it's not attributed to mefloquine. It's, attributed to the environment they're in. Food poisoning or something else. They're on a vacation and they have like drugs and alcohol available, and all their stuff is attributed to that. So we have this hidden epidemic, not just in our military, but in our civilian population also. Like because the civilians, when they take the drug, they're in a much more benign environment. Whereas us Army guys, we're usually in deserts or jungles, and it's, we're loaded down with body armor, rucksacks, weapons, we're dehydrated all the time. And when we're dehydrated, our bodies are not flushing the drug from our system. So we get a higher incidence of injury. Whereas civilians, what happens with the civilians, they're drinking and stuff like that, but it's for a short period of time. They're not there for 6 months to a year on this drug. They're there for, 3 weeks, maybe a month. And a very benign environment where they have access to ample water and stuff like that. But what usually happens with the civilians is, and this is where it's insidious, the drug, is a lot of their symptoms do not become apparent until the mefloquine starts to leave their system, which can be, up to, months after they return. It's basically their body goes into withdrawal and they're just done, you know, and that's when their symptoms are, because it's not connected to their travel or their trip. So,
And they haven't even heard this message yet. I have practitioners within my family who still think I wear my tinfoil hat. So we still have a long ways to go, but
I can walk into the travel clinic in Saskatoon today with a prescription for mefloquine, and I can get it filled.
I know.
It's terrible.
That is absolute. But here's the thing: we had that lady. I think it was 2 years ago in Alberta, the chief pediatric doctor for Alberta, stating that mefloquine was safe for use for women that are carrying a child. Like the misinformation and the efforts by the drug company just to promote this drug over the years have created such a huge smokescreen with this drug. Like, there's been so many instances of agencies overseas looking at mefloquine. Like, for example, the Israeli Defense Force, they had one deployment with mefloquine. And what then happened was they had so many guys that were injured from the drug. They go, okay, there's something not right with this drug. They did the actual rat model testing, and they found that this drug was fucking bad news. So they have never issued this drug other than that one time. Netherlands has also, their military has done a couple of deployments on mefloquine, and then they were going, hey, we've got a problem here. Like, we've got some weird shit happening, some incidents that are happening that shouldn't be happening.
And they can attribute it right to the drug.
And they did the rat model testing too. Like, there's been so many red flags raised about mefloquine, you know, years ago, in the right from day one when this drug first came on the market. But the problem is the drug companies have been so active with creating the smokescreen that this drug is okay, the 1 in 10,000, you know?
It was just a crazy Clayton Matchee. It had nothing to do with it.
Exactly.
Those horrid pictures, they all use them. They use those horrid pictures to this day. And, you know, they are real pictures, and I get that. They're painted in my brain. You have Clayton.
But the thing is, if you look closely at that one picture with that kid, with Clayton holding that baton across that kid's throat, if you look closely at that picture, you can clearly see it. I looked at that picture a couple of times, but I put it on a computer and I blew it up. His pupils are fully dilated.
I know him well. Yeah, I know him well. He's so out of it in those pictures. I don't even know who that is. His eyes are massive, and
but again, let's talk about what a mefloquine rage is. What is a mefloquine rage? We've now established what a mefloquine rage is. It's either a temporal lobe seizure or a midbrain seizure. Okay, and physical signs that you're having one of these. Number one, your pupils will fully dilate. Your skin will go pale. You'll have difficulty forming your words. You will, sometimes you'll have body posture issues. For example, majority of people I talk to that have these walk with a lean to the left. You become more clumsy. Like, I'll literally bump into shit and I'll trip over stuff constantly when I'm having my rages. You get extremely negatively focused. It's like I've done shit when I've been, how much information to share without getting thrown in jail? I've done stuff while I've been having these rages, and it is actually, I look back on it and it's like, wow, what the fuck what happened? Did you just do that? Like, there's reasons why I don't drink.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of stuff went on over the years, and
So
it's
drinking
just
too, allude to that. You know, people who have
drinking. Well, what we're finding with the drinking, like and the drugs, what happens with the like, I absolutely struggled with the alcoholism, because what happens with the mefloquine poisoning is part of the injury is to your vestibular system, auditory processing, and visual processing systems. And it's not the actual systems, it's the nerves that connect everything to your brain, where it passes through your brainstem. That's where the damage is. So what happens then is these types of injuries generate an incredible amount of anxiety. For example, the vestibular system, like it's absolutely, like I'm sorry, I'm just thinking about like over the years, like what has become normal. Like you go to get up out of a chair, and you all of a sudden you feel dizzy because you got up too fast, so you have to stop and grab the arm of the chair. You just have to pause for that half or a second or two, let your vestibular system reset. Like in a moving vehicle, like when you have so many moving vehicles on both sides of you, and you're in a moving vehicle yourself, that it irritates your vestibular system. That's why we see a lot of us having road rage incidents, is we just get, our vestibular systems just get swamped. So I lost my train of thought, sorry.
That's okay. You were explaining what you said, exactly what I was just
so this anxiety
about alcohol.
Yeah, but this anxiety, like, we're swamped with it 24/7. Like a large part of the sleep disturbance we have is related to the anxiety, because like our bodies are hardwired. Hang on. Look, I'm getting all worked up. Someone's coming up to do his job. A lot like our bodies, for example, are hardwired. If we have like some form of a head injury, that our bodies will roll us onto our sides so that we don't vomit and choke on our vomit if we're lying flat on our back. So what we're finding is a lot of people with mefloquine struggle with sleep. And what we're finding, though, is one of the most effective tools for countering this is actual alcohol. I can remember coming back from Somalia, and even when I was in Somalia, I would sit there, and it wouldn't take very much, probably like 3 or 4 beers, and then you just feel like the weight would come off your shoulders. It's like the alcohol fogs the anxiety and allows your brain to relax. Back to when we're back from Somalia, before I deployed to Rwanda, sitting up in the junior ranks club, and you're back around the family, so you can't be drinking and that all the time. So I remember going up to the junior ranks club and just sitting there shooting the shit with a couple of boys. And then, by, I think about beer number 3 or 4, it was just like, you could finally relax. It's just like, it's like the anxiety went away. Okay. And that's the problem we run into with a lot of guys with alcoholism, is
technology is not on our side right now.
Because that was the only way I could sleep for long. Hello?
Yeah, we lost you for just a second there, but you're
Oh,
back.
yeah. Okay. That's the way only way I could sleep for the longest time was literally making myself so drunk that I couldn't even hardly walk or talk. Like I used to go on a 2-week cycle for the longest time after I came back from Rwanda until my wife got tired and just booted me out. And then it was just like no holds barred after that. And it was just, I stayed drunk for like 24/7 for about a year. And then everything just imploded and court martial kicked out. But yeah, the alcoholism, I run into it all the time. So many guys actually struggle with it and they don't understand why they're struggling with it, why they have such a hard time quitting. Well, with the alcoholism, that's the only time a lot of guys can get any peace, can get any, how do you put it, like
Rest.
quiet in their brain. Like it's the only time the anxiety is actually masked, because pharmaceutical stuff works sometimes, like yeah. But the problem with the pharmaceuticals is they have their own whole list of negative side effects. And it's like, do I stay drunk or do I fucking totally fuck myself over with pharmaceuticals? Yeah, I don't know. It's fucking.
So you went through the alcoholism. You went through the.
Oh yeah, I battled it. I battled it, and I still. 98, I think, was the last time I had a drink. End of 97, early 98. But the thing is, I still struggle with it, though. Like especially when my PTSD's all flared up. I'm triggered. Like I live a very quiet life. I don't go out a lot type thing. And I definitely don't make a habit of going to environments where alcohol is served. Like there's no alcohol in my home. And because I need to be safe, like I don't need that day I'm having a bad mefloquine day. I don't need that to be there present,
So Dave,
like, and when I go out in public, like when I do the advocacy stuff and I'm away from home and that, like Marj, you've probably seen it. Like how many times where at these little gatherings and stuff, like Dave's there and then Dave's gone, like I'll come in.
I learned to recognize through your wife, like Tressa has explained, and you can see things come on with you if you know where to look for them. And usually you combat that by getting some good proteins in you and other things that you've learned how to make your body calmer through good nutrition and other things. We're singing the praises of alcoholism in one fashion because it numbed the anxiety, it took away all that pain. But what it really did, right, was make everything just absolutely worse. And it
when you're all hungover, like you're already battling with depression associated with the mefloquine poisoning. When you factor in the alcohol depression on top of that, and then all the mess you've made while you were drinking on top, like it's just
so that's a message we constantly tell veterans. Please do not drink if you have Quinism.
So actually the next question that I had, Dave, was what advice do you have for caregivers, loved ones, and families who are trying to navigate life after learning about Quinism? Because I know for myself, it was like a huge, like ball had dropped. And then it's like, I'd like to be able to, kind of explain, how people can figure out how to live and like what next steps. So like thinking of like the caregivers or someone that loves someone with Quinism.
Yeah. The biggest thing I tell caregivers is, number one, that the person they care about is not an asshole. And I really focus on explaining about the mefloquine rages, because these are the relationship killers.
Yeah.
Is these rages. And so I in detail explain what the mefloquine rages are and stuff like that, and why the importance of good, clean, healthy diet and exercise are so important to beating them. Because the big thing is, I could not recognize the early signs of these, my mefloquine rages starting, until Teresa started pointing them out. And all she used to say is, "You're starting to look off." And then as she's only had to do that a few times, then I was able to start, well, wait a minute, I'm starting to feel off. And this is what Teresa was, when Teresa was saying, I'm starting to look off. Because once these things start, you can't stop them. But if you can catch them in the early stages, what you can do is you can hit yourself with a lot of protein. You can remove yourself from your family so that you can just, calm down and let the protein work. Because once you get your brain refueled, like the rages are not going to happen. So Teresa would be, she's always watching out for my skin color. If I start to go pale, especially if we're out and about, and it doesn't take much. Like I've got it now down to, I can get some hard-boiled eggs and some Babel cheeses from the convenience store, and or I got a couple of little coffee shops that serve healthy food. That's not all processed food. You can go and get a good healthy soup and a sandwich, but very protein-rich foods right away, removing myself from situation where I could cause harm or further the downward cycle. Mm-hmm. So, how do you put it? What I would say to learn to recognize what the early signs of the mefloquine rages are. And again, when the pupils are fully dilated, but before that happens, like I go pale, my personality will change a bit. And Teresa picks up on these now and gives me a little nudge, but not only because she's been picking up on these, I now can recognize these signs. Mm-hmm. And that's when I will self-identify and, okay, like I'm not doing well. Today's done, exactly. Like, mm-hmm. Let's just change orientation here. Let's just go to the coffee shop, have a soup and a sandwich, and just chill out, watch a video or two on the phone for, half an hour. And we won't do the full plans we were doing for the day, but let's just go do something. Let's go see a movie. Let's not waste the day in the city. Like let's do something fun, family oriented, because there's no way I'm going down to the Midtown Plaza. Right. I'm not. Like let's not waste the day. Let's reorientate. Let's go shopping at this store instead. It's quieter. We can get what we need there.
That's wonderful. The key message I get from that is kind of like the message of hope that me and Marj have been talking about, right? Yeah. So it seems like there's hope, there's hope for the individual, like, kind of like the global community that we're all creating, but then there's hope for relationships and families, and like learning how to be in a relationship, how to parent, how to kind of like save the day and adjust things. So
yeah, and don't get me wrong. It's the issue becomes this is forever. There's no magic pill. It's you have to get used to it. You have to adapt to it. You can live and you can successfully have a family in that, but you just got to learn how to work around this a bit. You know, like if you have a broken leg, do you get up and go run a marathon? You know, like, no, you don't. You use crutches, you hobble around a bit, you still function, but you function at a reduced capacity, and you function to that injury. And the brain injury is no different. You have to adapt to the injury.
Absolutely.
Dave, when we get a chance, we want you to be like I've asked Mike Rude from Rude Awaken Tour to check in with us on his tour. I publicly want to ask you to continue to check in with us from time to time, because I would like you to explain in another episode the connection between the brain and the gut issues and the absolute necessity of protein. I know that just sounds like a whatever, but it's true, and you're living through that. And so we're going to do another session with you if you'd like.
That's a whole hour of discussing the gut-brain interaction.
But it's so important to get that message.
It's crucially important, that part. Okay, I've got to fly. I got to go pick up the mother-in-law. Okay. And you guys take care.
You too. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you.
So much.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
There we go. Awesome. Great to have Mike Rude. Oh my God, it's good to have Dave Bona on the show today. It was good to have Mike Rude the other day, but
it is. He's such a pillar for us all, right? Like, and he was the huge changing factor in my advocacy. After I met Dave, it sort of snowballed from there, and the connections just kept coming for both of us. And yeah, he's got great ways of explaining to people in real easy terms the importance of eating properly, the importance of protein, that gut-brain connection, and it's really super important because it affects you physically and mentally. So
absolutely,
it is an hour discussion.
Exactly. It's always a treat being around the both of you, you know, and kind of like hearing the story. So I'm glad that everyone today got a chance to kind of, you know, be a fly on the wall and learn those things too. So one
day we'll tell you why the rally started.
That's
why, right?
I'm sure that's more than an episode.
Yeah, it's been good to have him on board and in my life, and I know there are hundreds who found their way because of him and his quiet, knowledgeable way of just explaining it and making it something that you can easily walk away understanding. When he explains that Teresa notices when he's off, she because we go to Ottawa together and stuff like that, and he's away from her, away from his service dog a lot of the time, she explained to me how he gets, and I actually saw it once and knew, wow, you really do change. His eyes change color, he becomes pale, he leans to one side, he needs to eat protein, and it's amazing, and take that quiet time, and he'll get himself back on track right away. It's knowing to catch that, like he said, in the early stages, right?
Absolutely. So, yeah, no, hopefully you can maybe have the both of them on the show. Like, seems like another, you know, great episode, and I look forward to Dave.
It would, because she's got a lot to share.
Absolutely. So that's a super fun episode for today. So
it was.
Awesome.
I enjoyed today. I always enjoy this. So until we have our next episode, on behalf of Trina and I, this is We Got Your Six, and we're wishing you a wonderful, healthy day.
Awesome. Bye, guys.